Alrighty boys, well as you can see in the clip there, went to the track and things didn't go well. So we're going to do something a little different in this video.
What's up guys?
And instead of showing you all of the passes and the in-car, the out-of-car, and all the boring shit that I normally do in the videos, I'll just kind of briefly explain what happened. So first pass I went up there, I drove the truck to the track, I inflated the tires to like 35 psi so I could drive it to the track, and then I got all situated, went up for the pass, and then forgot to lower the tire pressure, so I like totally blew the tires off, didn't even budge, and that went a little bit like this. Spun real bad, got into it a couple times, did like half the track at 6 pounds, turned it up to about 13 on the dial boost halfway down the track, then went back and took some air out of the tires. Now this was just like a local car show, street car type event, so there was a lot of street tires and they didn't really prep the track. They did the night before, but I don't think they prepped it for this event at all, so a lot of people are having traction issues. People that I know that do usually hook up pretty well were having issues. So I lowered the tire pressure down to like 14 psi and I put a little timing ramp in after the launch. I don't really think that helped very much, but I ran it on about 13 pounds, pretty much same settings that I left it on last time. I ran like a 10-1, 10-0. So first pass with a 13-0 at 127. That was on like 6 pounds, ramped to 13 halfway down the track. Then this was all around the same boost level, like around 13. 10-1, 10-0, 10-2. This was the last pass. And each of the passes were spinning. I'll put the data overlay on this and you can watch the wheel speed, how it's kind of spiking because it was pretty much spinning the whole way down the track, even with the timing ramp. So nothing really earth-shattering out of that, and on the last pass, as I lifted and was braking to slow down, I realized my dash turned off and just completely lost power. Died. I knocked my battery terminal loose. Very spinny. After some digging around, I found my starter wire was actually hanging low. I didn't have it loomed very well, or I didn't have it loomed at all. I just kind of ran it under. It wasn't really ran very well. But I noticed the starter wire was actually hanging pretty low. It was only like 1 inch off the ground. So I don't know if that snagged on something, shorted something out, but something definitely happened where I lost power to everything. I still had dome light, but that was it. No power windows, nothing. None of that stuff worked. Key on wouldn't work. Nothing worked. So I dug around in the wiring a little bit. I checked the fuses, and what I found was this fuse here was blown. So you can see this red 50 amp fuse. It was this color before. I swapped this one in. This is a new one. 50 amp fuse. This is the ignition fuse. And when I wired this truck, I wired everything into the factory fuse box because I wanted to keep everything as factory as possible. So for some reason it blew the ignition fuse. I did find one fuse on the fuse box on the dash that was blown. It was a 7.5 amp, and it went to something that was not important. I also do carry this little jumper wire inside there. 7 years ago I did a video on this, just like a one wire relay bypass thing, and I've had this bypass wire in here ever since then. So I was able to bypass the fuse just to test it. And when I did that, the dash would come back on, the digital dash, the 3.5-inch Holley dash. That would come on, but it was like really fuzzy, like it didn't have power. It was like flickering, like it had low power or whatever. Grabbed a multimeter, tested everything, and everything had 12.6 volts everywhere I tested it. I tested at the alternator stud, at the battery. I tested at the fuse port on the Holley. I tested all the switch leads. I tested everything, and it was all like 12.61, 12.62 volts. Everything was good. And for some reason, I kept getting this screen coming up on my dash, and it would go to a screen that said searching for ECU. It was not connecting to the ECU. So even though I did get power back with the ignition fuse and I was able to crank everything then, it wouldn't connect to the ECU for whatever reason. So I disconnected all of the wiring from the ECU and I just let it sit for a while, thinking maybe it just, needed to power down or, turn it off and turn it back on again. Disconnected all of the power. And I have seen situations before with the Holley that like they're sensitive to voltage. Like if it's cranking and it goes low voltage, it'll freak it out and then lose the file and stuff like that. So I thought maybe that's what happened. It lost power when the ignition fuse blew and then lost the file, something like that. So I figured I would unplug it, let it sit for a bit, and then I went to try to start it again to turn it back on. When I had all the wiring disconnected, I forgot to plug it back in. And I keyed it forward and I realized I was still getting the same screen whether I had it plugged in or even when I had it unplugged, I was still getting the same screen on the Holley. So then I realized it was unplugged. I also pulled out the SD card because it said like no firmware, not reading the firmware or whatever that warning was, and decided to pull the SD card out and look at it because I was thinking about re-uploading the firmware onto the SD card because I usually keep the SD card contents in a separate folder on the desktop on my laptop just in case I lose whatever's on there, and then I can re-import the SD card contents. So I was going to do all that stuff. When I pulled the SD card out later on, that my last couple runs I data logged, I wasn't able to get a data log. So I'm wondering if subconsciously somewhere I flipped the switch during the day or something like that, because someone I was with at the track also had an issue with the lock on their SD card, so I don't know if I like subconsciously was messing with it and flipped it when we had that conversation. I unlocked the card, I plugged everything back into the ECU, plugged the card back in, turned the key on, fuel pump primed, everything looked good and fired right up, no problem. So that's all I did, was unplug everything, flip the SD card, plug it back in, plug the ECU back in, and that's what ended up fixing it after I replaced the fuse. So root cause, I don't know. I got to figure out what blew the fuse. I'm guessing it's loose wiring somewhere, maybe related to the starter wire. My connections at the battery are not that good, so I want to redo some of that stuff. I also want to redo the wiring for like charging posts on the back and a kill switch and all that stuff. I want to do that over winter, so I don't really want to tear into all that stuff yet this year. I still want to take it out a little bit, but probably I'll spend some time making that good enough just to get through the rest of the year. Because over winter I would like to redo the front suspension, do the air conditioning, clean up the wiring and stuff. I mean, I'm happy with the truck where it is now. I just would like to get the front camber issue figured out because the wheels are really far tilted in, and get the AC going and stuff like that. But I gotta say, I love this truck. So I'm happy, I'm really happy with where everything is at. I know it probably sounds really stupid because the truck has gone 8s before, so everybody's probably like, oh, it's really slow and now it sucks. Like, what's wrong with it? It's broken. But I'm really happy with everything, how it is. Like, I can drive it wherever I want. And if I can go run a 10.0 on a bad day, or on a bad day on a bad track, go 9s on a halfway decent track. That was my original goal. Like I said, was 950 with this thing. So 950 and be able to street drive it. So I love driving it. I have so much fun with it, just cruising it around, and it just like, don't have to worry about it except for when it blows a fuse. But I was confident when it did shut off that it was nothing serious. It was something probably stupid, and that's exactly what it was. Yeah, I like it. I like it in this form. I want to get a seat in it because my son came with me to the track, but Mom dropped him off, and then I had a friend bring him home because I don't have a seat in here, so we talked about getting a seat in there for him to ride with me. Yeah, suspension stuff, I want to put the hood back on. I would also like to put I think I want to try to put a 315 tire on it instead of the 275. I don't do any class racing stuff or anything like that that I would need a 275 for. I feel like I'd like to put a bigger tire on a 295 or a 315 because why not? And just know that I have better traction all the time, even on a not so good track. Probably end up doing that. But yeah, I just love this truck, and I'm very happy with it. Speaking of wiring shenanigans, I'm about to get to the point where I'm starting to wire and plumb the car here. I realized I haven't touched this car for like almost 8 months. The other day, I was looking through pictures on my phone the other day, and pictures came up. I saw pictures of when I finished the intake, and that was like 8 months ago. And holy moly, did that time fly. Well, I realized I really haven't done anything with this for a long time. So I want to get back on this, start doing the wiring. I did buy all of the connections for all of the engine side connections. I did get a coil pack kit and all that stuff. I pulled the fuel tank out the other day so I can start doing the fuel tank, fuel hat, and getting all the fuel system junk figured out. I do have this flange that I'm going to weld into the top. I got this from Brian that I bought the car from, and he has the same thing on his car. It's like a Subaru flange or something like that. Some other kind of flange. He gave me that because he had a spare, so that's what I'm going to weld into the top of the tank. And then rear end is in. Got to get the drive shaft made. I'll probably get the drive shaft stuff done this week.